A young blind girl, guided only by her dog's loyalty, discovers that her family's darkest secrets could destroy everything she knows. But how far will she go to uncover the truth? The fine rain fell on the streets of Portland when Emily Stewart opened the window of her room. Even without being able to see the grey sky, she could feel the moisture in the air, hear the sound of droplets hitting against the glass, and perceive the characteristic smell that preceded summer storms. By her side, Shadow, her inseparable guide dog, a golden Labrador, remained alert as always. "Can you feel that, Shadow?" she asked, running her fingers through the animal's soft fur. "It's as if the world is trying to tell us something." Shadow barked softly in response, as if understanding every word. 6 months had passed since the disappearance of Charles Stewart, and life in the family mansion had never been the same. Silence weighed heavily over corridors once filled with conversations and laughter. Anna, Emily's mother, had thrown herself headfirst into work, taking full control of S3 Tech, the cybersecurity company that Charles had founded. "Emily, breakfast is ready," Anna shouted from downstairs, her voice echoing through the almost empty house. At 17, Emily had learned to navigate the world without relying on vision. Every corner of the house was a mental map, perfectly traced in her mind. With Shadow guiding her steps, she descended the stairs confidently, feeling the wooden railing beneath her fingers. "Good morning, Mom," she greeted, finding her place at the table with precision. "Good morning, sweetheart." Anna's voice sounded tired, distant. "Did you sleep well?" "The same nightmare as always. Dad in the helicopter trying to tell me something I can't hear." Anna sighed, placing a cup of coffee in front of her daughter. "Emily, we've already talked about this. It was an accident. The technicians confirmed it. We need to move forward." The young woman nodded, but her expression revealed distrust. Since childhood, her other senses had sharpened to compensate for her lack of vision, and now they told her something was wrong in her mother's voice, a tremor, a hesitation, a fear that shouldn't be there. "Is S3 Tech facing problems?" she asked, bringing the cup to her lips. Anna hesitated for a moment, and Emily noticed. It was as if she could hear her mother's heart accelerate. "Nothing you need to worry about. Some investors are nervous, that's all. Your father's absence—" She paused, correcting herself. "Your father's loss created instability." "Instability?" Emily repeated, intrigued. "Or opportunity for someone?" The phone rang before Anna could respond, breaking the tension that had built between them. Shadow, always alert, perked up his ears, watching Anna walk away to answer. "Richard?" "Yes." "I understand." Anna's voice was just a whisper, but Emily's trained ears caught every word. "No, she doesn't know anything, and it needs to stay that way." That phrase made Emily's blood run cold. Richard Fontaine, the family's head of security, and her father's close friend, seemed to be involved in something her mother wanted to hide. That same afternoon, taking advantage of Anna being in a meeting at the company, Emily decided to explore her father's office, a place she had avoided since the day of the accident. With Shadow by her side, she entered the room that still held Charles Stewart's characteristic scent. "It's here, Shadow. Everything my father was is in this room." Her fingers slid over the polished wood of the desk, feeling every detail. "That's—" when Shadow began to growl softly, looking fixedly at one of the side drawers. "What is it, boy?" asked Emily, intrigued by the dog's unusual behavior. Guided by an instinct she didn't understand, Emily tried to open the drawer, finding it locked. After a few minutes of searching, she found a small key hidden under the desk's surface, exactly where her father used to keep his secrets when she was a child. The drawer opened with a metallic click, revealing an envelope with the S3 Tech seal and an inscription in Braille that made her heart race. "Protect the truth at any cost." Before she could open the envelope, she heard the sound of a car parking at the entrance of the mansion. Anna had returned earlier than expected, and Emily knew she shouldn't be there. "Come on, Shadow," she whispered, tucking the envelope into her jacket pocket. "We need to discover what my father was hiding and why Mom doesn't want me to know." They silently left the office. Emily couldn't imagine that the envelope would be just the beginning of a journey that would change her life forever, revealing secrets capable of shaking the foundations of power in the country. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching us from, and we'll continue. The envelope seemed to weigh a ton in Emily's pocket as she hid in her room. Shadow, lying at her feet, kept his ears alert, as if he too knew the importance of that moment. Outside, the rain had grown stronger, and the sound of distant thunder created an even more tense atmosphere. "I hope I'm doing the right thing, Dad," whispered Emily, her trembling fingers carefully opening the envelope. Inside, she found a small metallic device, cold to the touch, and a card with inscriptions in Braille. Her fingers slid over the raised dots, deciphering the message. 06-1708, Prometheus. The date was significant. Her 10th birthday, the day Charles had given her Shadow, promising that the dog would be her guardian forever. Prometheus, she repeated, trying to understand the reference. The titan who stole fire from the gods to give to humanity. At that moment, someone knocked on the door, making her hastily hide the device and the card under her pillow. "May I come in?" Anna's voice sounded from the other side of the door. "Of course, Mom." Anna entered, bringing with her the expensive perfume she always wore and a worried expression that Emily could sense even without seeing. "Were you resting?" asked Anna, sitting on the edge of the bed. "Just thinking. The rain makes me melancholic." Anna sighed, taking her daughter's hands between her own. "I wish I could protect you from all this sadness, Emily. Your father—" She hesitated. "Your father always said you were special, that you saw the world in a way that no one else could." "Why were you and Richard talking about me today?" Emily asked directly. The silence that followed confirmed her suspicions. Anna released her hands, standing up. "Company matters, Emily. Richard is concerned about everyone's safety since your father left us." "You think it wasn't an accident?" The question escaped before she could contain it. "Why do you say that?" Anna's voice grew tense. "Because Richard would never increase security because of a mechanical accident." Anna took a deep breath, and Emily realized she had touched on a sensitive point. "There are people interested in your father's projects, Emily, valuable projects. Richard is just being cautious." "What projects?" "Nothing you need to worry about." "Right now." Anna kissed her daughter's forehead. "I need to get back to the company. We have a meeting with the shareholders. Mary is downstairs if you need anything." After Anna left, Emily waited a few minutes before picking up the device again. It was small, the size of a flash drive, but with details her sensitive fingers could perceive. Tiny buttons and what appeared to be a USB port. "Let's find out what this is, Shadow." She went to the specially adapted notebook, a gift from her father the previous Christmas. She connected the device and immediately a computerized voice filled the room. "Biometric identification required." Emily, surprised, touched the small area that seemed to be a sensor on the device. There was a brief silence and then the voice returned. Emily Stewart identified. "Welcome to Project Prometheus." The notebook began to run programs automatically, while the voice explained, "This is a security system. The information contained here is classified and protected. Your father, Charles Stewart, designated you as guardian in case of compromise of the main security." "Guardian," murmured Emily, confused. "What are you talking about?" Project Prometheus was developed as a counter-surveillance tool. However, its potential applications have attracted unwanted attention. Your father believed the project had been compromised. "By whom?" asked Emily, feeling her heart race. "Analysis in progress. Compiling data. For your safety, this device can only be accessed in your presence and contains only fragments of the complete project." At that moment, Shadow began to growl softly, looking at the window. Emily froze, attentive to the sounds around her. Beyond the rain, she could hear something else, careful footsteps in the garden. "Someone's out there, aren't they?" she whispered to Shadow, who confirmed with a contained bark. Quickly, she disconnected the device and hid it, along with the card in a secret compartment in the base of a small sculpture on her bedside table, another gift from her father, who always said, "Everyone needs a place to keep secrets." "Mary," called Emily, trying to sound casual, knowing the housekeeper could hear her through the room's intercom. "Yes, miss," responded the housekeeper's voice. "Are you expecting someone?" "Shadow is restless." "No, miss. Just the usual security guards. In the perimeter." Emily frowned, intrigued. If they were the usual guards, why was Shadow acting differently? The dog knew all the house staff. "Mary, can you ask Richard to check the garden when he arrives? I think I heard something." "Mr. Richard arrived a few minutes ago, miss. I'll let him know." That was strange. Richard had arrived without announcing himself, something he never did. He always greeted Emily upon arrival, a ritual they had maintained since she was a child. "Come on, Shadow," she whispered, taking the dog's leash. "I think we need to find out what Richard is doing here." With careful steps, Emily and Shadow descended the main staircase. The Stewart mansion, with its wide corridors and high ceilings, used to be a place of comfort for Emily. Every corner of that house was mapped in her mind with millimetric precision. But that night, the familiar walls seemed to hide secrets, and the sounds of the rain masked voices that she desperately tried to identify. Guided by Shadow, Emily approached the library, where she could hear the murmur of voices. The door was ajar, and she positioned herself at the perfect angle for the sound waves to reach her sensitive ears. "We can't wait any longer, Anna." It was Richard's voice, tenser than Emily had ever heard before. "They're getting closer. The device needs to be found." "But Charles never told me where he hid it." Anna's voice was choked, almost desperate. "You were his best friend, Richard. If he didn't trust you with that secret, why would he trust me?" "Because you're his wife. And knowing Charles, he would leave clues. Something that only you would understand." The silence that followed was filled only by the sound of the rain and occasional thunder. Emily could feel her heart beating so hard that she feared being discovered. "What if he left it with Emily?" Anna finally suggested. A chill ran down Emily's spine when she heard her name. "Impossible," Richard promptly replied. "Charles would never put his daughter at risk. He loved her too much for that." "You don't understand, Richard." Anna's voice changed, taking on a tone that Emily had never heard before. "Charles always believed that Emily saw the world in a unique way. He said that her lack of vision made her more perceptive to truths that others ignored. Even so, it would be too calculated a risk, even for Charles. We need to continue searching without involving her. Olympus is mobilizing resources to find Prometheus, and if they discover that Emily knows something—" At that moment, Shadow moved slightly, causing his collar to tinkle. The sound, though almost imperceptible, was enough to interrupt the conversation. "In the library." "Did you hear that?" Richard's voice was alert now. Emily silently retreated, pulling Shadow through the side corridor. Quickly they entered the kitchen, pretending to be looking for something in the refrigerator when Richard's footsteps approached. "Miss Emily?" he called, his voice returning to the paternal tone of always, but now sounding false to the young woman's ears. "Oh, Richard, you startled me." Emily forced naturalness into her voice. "I was looking for a snack for me and Shadow. I didn't know you were here. I arrived a short while ago. Your mother and I were discussing some security details." Emily smiled, tilting her head slightly, a gesture she knew people interpreted as innocent curiosity. "Security details always sound so mysterious." She paused, feeling Richard's tension. "Dad used to talk like that too when he didn't want to worry me." Richard approached, placing his hand on her shoulder with the gentleness of always. "Your father was an extraordinary man, Emily, and you're more like him than you imagine." There was something in his voice, a mixture of genuine admiration and concern, that made Emily hesitate. Was Richard really an enemy? Or was he also trying to protect her in his own way? "I miss him," she admitted, letting the real vulnerability in her voice mask her suspicions. "We all do." Richard sighed. "Your father had a vision for the future that few understood." Unfortunately, that put him in the path of powerful people. Emily felt her pulse quicken. It was the first time someone openly admitted that her father's disappearance might not have been accidental. "What people, Richard?" she asked, keeping her voice low. There was a pause, as if Richard was pondering how much he could reveal. "People who consider themselves above the law, Emily. A group your father called Olympus, executives, politicians, judges, all connected. By mutual interests and the belief that they know what's best for everyone. And Project Prometheus, what does it have to do with that?" The silence that followed was deafening. Emily could practically hear Richard's thoughts rapidly reorganizing. "How? Do you know about that?" His voice was controlled, but she could feel the shock. Emily hesitated, aware that she was in dangerous territory. Revealing too much could put her at risk, but revealing too little could leave her without necessary allies. "I heard you talking." She opted for a half-truth. "And Dad, he mentioned that name a few times when he thought I wasn't listening." Richard took a deep breath, and Emily heard the soft sound of a chair being pulled out. "Sit down, Emily. This conversation shouldn't happen now, but perhaps it's inevitable." At that moment, Richard's cell phone vibrated. He answered quickly, and his posture changed instantly. "Understood. We're leaving now." He hung up and turned to Emily, his voice now loaded with urgency. "We need to go, now. Take only the essentials and Shadow. Olympus men found a clue and are coming here." "And my mother?" asked Emily, fear finally breaking through her facade of calm. "She'll come with us, don't worry, but we need to be quick and quiet." As she climbed the stairs to get her things, including the carefully hidden Prometheus device, Emily couldn't help but wonder who she could really trust. If her own home, the place where she had always felt safe, had now become dangerous, where else would she find refuge? With Shadow by her side, more alert than ever, she prepared to leave behind not only her house, but also the life she had known until then. The world her father had feared so much had finally reached her, and now there was no going back. The rain battered the windshield of the armored SUV as Richard drove through the dark streets of Portland. Anna was in the passenger seat, silent and tense, while Emily and Shadow occupied the back seat. The vehicle cut through the night like a ghost, avoiding the main avenues and opting for secondary, less illuminated streets. "Where are we going?" asked Emily, stroking Shadow's fur to calm not only the dog but also herself. "To a safe place," Richard replied without taking his eyes off the road. "A location your father prepared in case something like this happened." "You knew this could happen?" Emily's question hung in the air like a silent accusation. "Charles was always cautious," Anna interjected, her voice trembling. He had contingencies for everything." "Except for his own disappearance," retorted Emily, unable to contain the bitterness in her voice. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of rain and the occasional distant thunder. Emily could feel the car making several turns, frequently changing direction, as if Richard was trying to shake off possible pursuers. "Are we being followed?" she asked, sensing the growing tension inside the vehicle. "Possibly," admitted Richard. "Olympus has eyes everywhere. Traffic cameras, drones, informants in police forces." "Sounds more like a criminal organization than a group of businessmen," observed Emily. "The line between legitimate power and organized crime is thinner than many imagine, Emily," said Richard, his voice loaded with experience. "Especially when those who make the laws can also break them without consequences." The car finally slowed down, entering an area that Emily identified, by the sounds and smells, as being further away from the city. The asphalt gave way to a dirt road, and the noise of the rain against the metal body changed tone. "We're almost there," announced Richard. "It's an old country house that your father bought using a fake name. Nobody besides us three and two trusted employees knows of the existence of this place." Minutes later, the vehicle stopped. Emily heard the sound of an electronic gate opening and closing after their passage. When the engine was turned off, the silence was almost complete, except for the constant sound of the rain. "Welcome to the refuge," said Richard, opening the door for everyone to get out. Emily, with Shadow guiding her steps, smelled wood and wet earth. The house seemed smaller than the mansion, more welcoming in a way. Richard guided them inside, and Emily immediately began to map the space in her mind. "The house has 2 floors," explained Richard as they walked. 4 bedrooms upstairs, kitchen and living room downstairs. There's a basement too, but we'll talk about that later. Emily noticed that her mother was unusually silent. Her steps were hesitant, as if Anna was entering completely unknown territory. "You've never been here before, Mom?" asked Emily, surprised. "No," admitted Anna, her voice small. "Your father, he kept some things separate from our relationship. To protect us, he said." "Or to protect himself," murmured Emily, low enough that only Shadow could hear. Once inside the house, Richard activated security systems that made the Stewart mansion seem like a common house. Emily could hear the low hum of electronic equipment working, cameras adjusting their angles, sensors being activated. "You must be hungry," said Richard, heading to the kitchen. "I'll prepare something quick while we get organized." "Richard," called Emily, staying close to Shadow, "before anything else, I want to know exactly what's happening. What is Project Prometheus? Why is it so important that these Olympus people are willing to do anything to get it?" Richard stopped his movements, and Emily could feel his eyes on her, evaluating her. "Your father developed technology that can access and control any digital system in the world," he explained finally. "Imagine being able to enter any database, alter records, divert funds, manipulate news, influence elections, all without leaving traces. It's a power that transcends borders and laws." "And he created this, why?" questioned Emily, horrified by the implications. "It wasn't intentional at the beginning," interjected Anna, sitting at the table. "Charles was developing a protection system against cyber attacks, something to defend vital institutions. But as the project evolved, he realized he had created something much more powerful and dangerous. That's when he decided to hide the project and the research," continued Richard. "He divided the code into several parts, hiding them separately. The device we believe he left behind is just a key, a piece of the puzzle." "And you think I have that key?" Emily felt the weight of the device hidden in her pocket. There was a moment of silence, during which Emily could practically hear the mental gears of Richard and Anna turning. "We believe so," Richard finally confirmed. "Your father trusted you in a way that he didn't trust anyone else, not even me or your mother." At that moment, Shadow began to growl softly. His attentive ears turned toward one of the windows. Richard immediately moved, checking the security. "Monitors." "Damn!" he exclaimed. "They found us faster than I expected." "How is that possible?" Anna's voice was loaded with fear. "You said nobody knew this place." "Someone must have betrayed us," replied Richard, his tone somber as he retrieved a gun hidden under the kitchen counter. "Or they have resources we underestimated." Emily felt the environment around her transform. The safe refuge had become a trap, and the people she trusted most might not be who they appeared to be. With Shadow by her side, more alert than ever, she made a decision. From that moment on, she would trust only her own instincts and the only being who had never betrayed her, her faithful guardian. "Emily, come with me," whispered Richard, taking her by the arm firmly but without hurting her. "Anna, activate the Hephaestus protocol. You know how it works." Anna nodded, though Emily could feel the fear emanating from her. Shadow stuck close to the young woman's heels as Richard guided her down a narrow corridor she hadn't mapped yet. "What's the Hephaestus protocol?" asked Emily, trying to keep her voice steady despite her racing heart. "A defense system your father installed." Richard stopped in front of what seemed to be a bookcase. "It'll buy us some time." His fingers moved quickly, activating a hidden mechanism. Emily heard the sound of gears moving, and then the smell of old air and concrete invaded her nostrils. "A secret passage? Seriously?" She couldn't contain the tone of incredulity, even in that tense situation. Dad always had a flair for the dramatic, but this is too much even for him. "Your father was many things, Emily." Richard guided her down the stairs, with Shadow in front of them now. "Visionary, brilliant, paranoid at times, but never excessive without reason." The passage led to an underground bunker equipped with cutting-edge technology. Emily could feel the hum of the servers, the cold air from the cooling systems, the characteristic smell of new equipment. "Your father's true laboratory," explained Richard as he helped her orient herself in the new space. "This is where he worked on Project Prometheus away from curious eyes, including S3 techs." Emily explored the environment with her hands, feeling metallic surfaces, buttons, keyboards adapted with braille markings. It was as if Charles had prepared that place especially for her. "He knew I would end up here someday," she murmured, more to herself than to Richard. Above them, muffled sounds indicated that Anna had activated the Hephaestus protocol. Doors and windows being locked, defense systems coming into operation. "We have about 30 minutes before they can get in, if they're really from Olympus," said Richard, typing commands into one of the computers. "We need to find what your father left here." "What exactly are we looking for?" asked Emily, still processing everything that was happening. "A map." Richard stopped typing. "Charles divided Prometheus into 5 parts, hidden in different locations. The device we believe you have is the key that reveals the location of these parts." Emily hesitated, but decided it was time to reveal what she knew. "You're right." She removed the device from her pocket. "I found this in my father's office, along with a card with the date of my 10th birthday and the word Prometheus." Richard was silent for a moment, and Emily could feel his surprise. "So it's true. He trusted you." There was something in Richard's voice that Emily couldn't completely decipher. Admiration? Concern? Perhaps both. "The device spoke to me," she continued. "It said I was the guardian, that the system could only be accessed in my presence." "Biometric recognition?" Richard seemed impressed. Charles was always ahead of his time, but why you? Why not Anna or me? The question hung in the air for a few seconds before Emily answered. "Maybe because he knew I see people differently, not with my eyes, but with something deeper." The sound of footsteps on the stairs interrupted the conversation. It was Anna, breathless and visibly shaken. "They're surrounding the house," she informed. 4 vehicles, at least 12 men. Professionals. The Hephaestus protocol won't hold them for long." "Who are they exactly?" demanded Emily. "And don't just tell me Olympus. I want names, faces, explanations." Anna and Richard exchanged glances, and Emily could feel the tension between them, something beyond the imminent danger. "The leader's name is Augustus Mitchell," Anna finally answered. "Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, apparently above any suspicion, but in reality the coordinator of the entire Olympus operation." "And the others?" "Cabinet secretaries, owners of media, conglomerates, heads of intelligence agencies," continued Richard. "People who together have controlled the country from the shadows for decades." Emily tried to process the magnitude of what she was hearing. Her father had stood against the most powerful people in the country, and now she was at the center of this conflict. And what exactly do they want with Prometheus? "Absolute control," replied Richard, his voice grave. "With Prometheus, they could manipulate elections, destroy opponents, create alternative realities in the media, all without leaving traces. It would be the end of democracy as we know it." Shadow, who until then had been alert but quiet, began to bark at one of the bunker walls. Emily immediately tensed. "Is there another entrance?" she asked, alarmed. "There shouldn't be," replied Richard, drawing his gun again. It was then that the wall Shadow was barking at began to move, revealing another passage. Everyone froze, prepared for the worst, but the voice that came from the darkness wasn't threatening. It was familiar and impossible. "You took longer than I expected to get here," said the voice, making Emily's heart stop for a second. "Dad?" she whispered, unable to believe what her ears were telling her. The figure of Charles Stewart emerged from the secret passage, alive and quite different from the last image Emily had of him. Thinner, with stubble and deep circles under his eyes, but undoubtedly her father. "Hello, my little guardian," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It seems we have a lot to talk about, and unfortunately little time to do it. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching us from, and we'll continue." Time seemed to freeze in that underground bunker. Emily remained motionless, her entire body trembling with a mixture of shock, relief, and confusion. Shadow, on the other hand, immediately recognized Charles and ran to him, wagging his tail frantically. This is impossible," stammered Anna, her face pale as if she had seen a ghost. "We identified your body, the helicopter." "What you identified was exactly what I wanted you to identify," replied Charles, bending down to pet Shadow. "A corpse with my DNA, but not my body." "Cloning?" asked Richard, still in a defensive position, the gun half lowered, but not completely. "Older. Technology. Plastic surgery on a terminal patient who accepted the procedure in exchange for a considerable sum for his family." Charles looked directly at Emily, who remained motionless. The DNA was manipulated enough to pass standard tests. Emily stepped forward, her hands extended, seeking the contact that would confirm the impossible. Her fingers touched the familiar face, the rough beard, the wrinkles around the eyes that always formed when he smiled. There was no doubt. It was really her father. "Why?" was all she could ask, her voice almost a whisper. Charles held his daughter's hands between his, that familiar gesture that made Emily's heart ache. "To protect you. To protect all of you." He looked briefly at Anna. "Olympus discovered what Prometheus could do. They wanted the technology at any cost. I knew they would come after me, and eventually after you." "So you faked your own death?" Anna seemed to oscillate between relief and anger. "Let me think I had lost my husband, that Emily had lost her father. It was the only way, Anna." Charles's voice was gentle but firm. "Olympus would never give up as long as I was alive. My death gave them a problem. Where would I have hidden Prometheus?" Emily was trying to process everything, her emotions a whirlwind. But there was something more urgent to be discussed. "They're here, Dad," she said, "surrounding the house. We don't have much time." Charles nodded, immediately becoming alert. "Then the plan worked. They followed you here, exactly as I expected." "What?" Richard stepped forward, his expression hardening. "You knew this would happen. It was inevitable. The device I left for Emily emits an encrypted signal when activated, imperceptible to most trackers, but not to Olympus." Charles turned to a panel on the wall, typing a complex sequence. "I needed them to come, all together, to execute the final phase of the plan." "What plan?" demanded Anna, her voice trembling with anger. "What game are you playing, Charles?" Charles looked at all of them, his eyes finally resting on Emily. Project Prometheus was never just about surveillance technology. It was a trap, an elaborate trap for Olympus. A large screen on the bunker wall lit up, showing live images of the house perimeter. Men in black armed, carefully approaching. Among them, Emily could hear Charles identify some figures. Augustus Mitchell himself. Charles pointed to an older man with grey hair who seemed to be coordinating the operation from inside a car. "And there, that's Robert Vance, Secretary of Justice. Next to him, Edward Fields, owner of the country's largest media conglomerate. All here personally for a prize that doesn't exist the way they imagine." "What do you mean?" asked Emily, confused. "Prometheus, as they conceive it, doesn't exist." Charles typed more commands and new screens lit up. "The technology I developed doesn't allow controlling global systems or manipulating elections. What it does is much simpler and at the same time much more powerful. It documents, tracks, and exposes." The screens now showed documents, emails, audio recordings, videos of secret meetings. A massive amount of information about illegal operations, manipulation of government contracts, embezzlement, bribery of judges. While they thought they were investigating me, I was collecting evidence against them. Charles smiled, but it was a tired smile. Every move, every conspiracy, every crime, all documented. Emily listened, amazed by her father's audacity and intelligence, but one doubt persisted. "And why did you choose me as guardian? Why not Richard or Mom?" A heavy silence fell over the bunker. Charles looked deeply into his daughter's sightless eyes, as if he could somehow make her see him. "Because you're the only one I can trust completely." "What does that mean?" asked Anna, her voice trembling. Charles turned to her, his expression a mixture of sadness and determination. "It means that Olympus has agents everywhere, Anna, even in our family." Charles's gaze briefly shifted to Richard, whose expression remained unchanged. But Emily, with her heightened sensitivity, noticed a subtle change in the security chief's breathing. "Are you insinuating that Richard—" Anna began, but was interrupted by the sound of an explosion above them. The Hephaestus protocol had been breached. "We don't have any more time," declared Charles, moving quickly to another panel. "The plan must continue. Emily, I need the device now." Emily hesitated, suddenly unsure. The revelations were too much, and the distrust planted by her father made her question everything and everyone around her. "How can I be sure it's really you?" she asked, holding the device firmly in her pocket. "How do I know this isn't another manipulation?" Charles approached her, gently touching her face. "On your 10th birthday, when I gave you Shadow, I said something that I never shared with anyone else, remember?" Emily felt tears welling up in her eyes. How could she forget? "You said that Shadow wasn't just my eyes in the world, but that I was his eyes for what really mattered, the truth in people's hearts." Charles smiled, wiping her tear from his daughter's face. "And you are, Emily. You always have been. That's why you're the perfect guardian for Prometheus. Not because it gives you power, but because you've always known how to use it wisely." At that moment, Shadow began to growl, not at Charles, but at someone behind them. The metallic sound of a gun being cocked broke the emotion of the moment. "This is very touching, Charles," said Richard, now pointing his gun directly at Charles's head. "But I'm afraid your plan ends here." The air in the bunker became dense, loaded with tension. Emily felt her heart race, while Shadow growled continuously at Richard, ready to protect his owners at the slightest sign. "So I was right," said Charles, his voice surprisingly calm for someone with a gun pointed at his head. "How long, Richard? From the beginning, or did they recruit you later?" Richard kept the gun steady, his face an impenetrable mask that Emily, even without being able to see, could feel through his controlled voice. "Almost from the beginning." There was an almost regretful tone in his confession. "You're brilliant, Charles, but naive. You believed you could change the system, bring down giants. I always knew it was impossible. And for that, you betrayed our friendship? Our trust." Anna seemed devastated, her voice trembling with emotion. "Don't be hypocritical, Anna." Richard cast a quick glance in her direction. "You made your own choices too." Emily felt as if the ground was opening beneath her feet. Turning toward her mother, she sought some sign, some change in breathing or heartbeat, that could contradict Richard's implicit accusation. "Mom?" The word came out as a painful sigh from Emily's lips. Anna remained silent for a few seconds that seemed like an eternity. When she finally spoke, her voice was choked with contained emotion. "I never wanted this to happen. Emily, everything I did was to protect you, to secure your future. Protect me how? By allying yourself with the people who wanted to destroy Dad?" "Your mother isn't an Olympus agent, if that's what you're thinking," clarified Charles, without taking his eyes off Richard and his gun. "But she knew I was being investigated. She knew the net was closing in, and she chose to cooperate with them at a certain level, believing that this way she could save me." "They approached me 2 months before the accident," explained Anna, tears now flowing freely down her face. "They said they knew about Prometheus, that Charles was messing with dangerous forces. They offered a deal. If I helped them recover the technology, they would guarantee our family's safety." "And you believed them?" The disappointment in Emily's voice was palpable. "Not completely. But I thought I could buy time, find a solution." Anna looked at Charles. "I never imagined that you would fake your own death. I spent 6 months believing I had lost you forever." The sound of more explosions above brought them back to the immediate reality of the danger. "Touching family reunion, but we have a schedule to keep." Richard adjusted his position, now gesturing with the gun for everyone to move to the opposite side of the bunker. "The device, Emily. Now." Emily felt the weight of the small object in her pocket. Everything depended on it now. Her mind worked, frantically seeking a way out. "If I give this to you, what happens to us?" she asked, trying to buy time. Richard gave a half smile. "You stay here until I leave with the device. After that, well, Olympus decides. They'll eliminate us," Charles stated categorically. "We're witnesses, Emily. We know too much." "Not necessarily," countered Richard. "Olympus can be cruel, but it's pragmatic. Talent like yours, Charles, is rare. They could find a use for you under the right circumstances. As a prisoner, working under coercion to develop more tools of oppression?" Charles shook his head. "I prefer the end." Shadow continued to growl, his body tense like a spring about to snap. Emily could feel the animal's breathing, his protective instinct, his unwavering loyalty. An idea began to form in her mind. "All right," she said finally, slowly reaching into her pocket. "I'll give you the device." "Emily, no," exclaimed Charles. "We don't have a choice, Dad." She removed the device from her pocket, holding it in front of her. "But first I want to know something, Richard. Everything you did for me all these years, the training, the advice, the protection, was it all a lie?" Richard hesitated briefly, and Emily noticed the subtle change in his posture. She had found a vulnerable point. "Not all of it," he admitted, his voice betraying a genuine emotion for the first time. "I really do care about you, Emily. I always have. That's why I hope you'll understand that I'm doing this for your own good. The world your father imagines is an impossible utopia. Olympus is reality, and the only way to survive is by accepting that." "I understand." Emily stepped forward, the device extended in her hand. "So it was because you care about me that you taught me that special defense technique? The one you said was our secret?" A glimmer of understanding passed through Richard's eyes, but before he could react, Emily let the device fall to the floor and shouted, "Shadow, shield!" The special training that Richard had given to Emily and Shadow kicked in. The dog, in Hyek, a quick and precise movement, launched himself against Richard, not to attack but to unbalance him. Simultaneously, Emily threw herself to the ground, rolling away from the line of fire. The shot came a second later, the bullet hitting the bunker ceiling. Charles, reacting with surprising agility for someone who had been in hiding for so long, lunged at Richard. The two men fell to the floor, struggling for control of the gun. Anna ran to Emily, pulling her behind a counter of equipment to protect her. "Emily, are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling with fear and adrenaline. "I am." Emily was trying to locate Shadow by sound, worried about her guardian. "And Shadow? Where's Shadow?" A firm bark answered her. The Labrador had moved away from the fight, following his training to protect Emily above all else. The struggle between Charles and Richard continued intensely. Despite the years in hiding, Charles still maintained the physical fitness and training he had received in his youth before becoming a technology entrepreneur. Richard, however, was younger and stronger. A second shot echoed through the bunker, followed by a muffled scream. The sound made Emily's blood run cold. "Dad!" she shouted, desperate, trying to run toward the fight but being restrained by Anna. "Wait!" ordered Anna, holding her daughter firmly. "It's dangerous!" It was then they heard footsteps rapidly descending the main stairs to the bunker. The door opened violently, and several armed men invaded the place. "Freeze! Federal Bureau of Investigation!" shouted the first man to enter. Confusion took over the environment, orders being shouted, people identifying themselves, the sound of Richard being immobilized on the floor. "Is everyone all right?" asked a female voice that Emily didn't recognize. "My father," insisted Emily. "He was shot." "I'm fine, Emily," replied Charles, his voice tense with pain, but alive. "Just a scratch on the arm. Nothing serious." Relieved, Emily let herself fall to the floor with Shadow immediately coming to her side, licking her face as if wanting to confirm that she too was okay. "I don't understand," said Anna, confused. "Who are you? How did you find this place?" "Agent Rachel Martin, FBI Special Operation," replied the woman. "We've been monitoring Olympus for more than 2 years, with the collaboration of Mr. Charles Stewart." Emily felt a new whirlwind of emotions invade her. Her father had not only faked his own death, but had been secretly working with the authorities the whole time. "And outside?" asked Charles, concerned. Augustus and the others? All detained, confirmed Agent Rachel. The operation is occurring simultaneously across the country. Judges, politicians, businessmen, all members of Olympus are being arrested at this very moment. The silence that followed was charged with a strange mixture of relief and uncertainty. The nightmare seemed to be coming to an end, but the consequences of the lies and betrayals still hung over them like a shadow. Shadow, sensing his owner's tension, rested his head on her lap, offering the silent comfort that had always been his specialty. Emily caressed his fur, gratitude in every touch. "And now?" she finally asked, her voice small in the large space of the bunker. "What happens to us?" The answer to that question was more complex than anyone there could imagine at that moment. The end of Olympus was just the beginning of a new journey for the Stewart family, a journey of reconciliation, truths, and perhaps forgiveness. 3 days had passed since the operation that dismantled Olympus. Emily was sitting on the balcony of the safe apartment provided by the FBI, with Shadow lying at her feet. The late afternoon sun warmed her skin while she tried to organize the thoughts that kept spinning in her mind like a whirlwind. The news talked about nothing else. The largest anti-corruption operation in the country's history, they said. Important names were falling one after another, like dominoes: judges, politicians, businessmen. People who, until a few days ago, seemed untouchable were now facing justice. The entire country was in shock with the revelations, with the size and depth of the conspiracy that had been dismantled. Thinking about the future, Charles's voice brought her back to the present. Emily turned her face toward her father's, a voice still not completely accustomed to the idea that he was really alive, there by her side. "Thinking about everything, actually," she replied, offering a small smile. "The past, the present, what comes next." Charles sat in the chair next to his daughter, the light sound of the bandage on his arm brushing against the fabric of his shirt. "I know you have many questions," he said softly. "And you deserve all the answers." "Where to start?" Emily gave a humorless laugh. "Maybe with the fact that you faked your own death, or that you used me as a piece in your game against Olympus?" Charles sighed, and Emily could feel the weight of guilt in his breathing. It wasn't a game, Emily, it was a war. A silent war that had been waged for years, and that could have destroyed the country if Olympus had won. He paused, seeking the right words. "As for you, it was never my intention to use you. The truth is that you were the only person I could trust completely." Emily was silent for a moment, processing her father's words. "And Mom, why didn't you trust her?" The balcony door opened at that moment, and Emily recognized Anna's light footsteps approaching. "Because I made mistakes," replied Anna, sitting on the other side of her daughter. "Mistakes that gave your father reasons to doubt." Charles extended his hand over Emily's lap, seeking Anna's. When their fingers met, Emily could feel the initial hesitation and later the firm and reconciliatory squeeze. "Your mother was trying to protect us in her own way," explained Charles. "When Olympus approached her, she believed she could negotiate, buy time. It was a mistake, but an understandable one." "And you couldn't have told me?" Anna's voice contained a hurt not yet completely resolved. "Having faked your death, Charles, you have no idea what I went through. I know, and I deeply regret that." Charles's voice was thick with emotion, but at that moment it seemed the only viable option. Olympus was everywhere, infiltrated at the highest levels. I needed to disappear to be able to work with the FBI without raising suspicions, and he hesitated. "And?" insisted Emily. "And I wasn't sure how far your mother's involvement with them went." Charles squeezed Anna's hand as a silent request for forgiveness. "Now I know she never really helped them, just pretended to cooperate while looking for a way out." Shadow suddenly raised his head, his ears alert. Seconds later, soft knocks on the door announced someone's arrival. It was Agent Rachel Martin, who had coordinated the operation. "Sorry to interrupt the family moment," she said, approaching. "But we have important news." "About Richard?" Emily asked immediately. Rachel sat in a nearby chair, the sound of papers being handled reaching Emily's sensitive ears. Yes, he started to cooperate, offering information in exchange for procedural benefits. His betrayal is even more complex than we imagined. How so? Charles leaned forward, interested. Richard wasn't just working for Olympus. He was, in fact, a double agent. Rachel paused, letting the impact of her words be absorbed. He was originally recruited by national intelligence to infiltrate Olympus, but over time, he was seduced by the power and money they offered. Emily felt a tightness in her chest. Richard had been almost an uncle to her, a constant protector throughout her life. The complexity of this betrayal made everything even more painful. "Did he mention anything about me?" she asked, her voice small. "Yes." Rachel's voice softened. "He said that of everything he did in his life, the only genuine regret is having betrayed your trust, Emily. He really did care about you, despite everything." Shadow approached Emily, as if feeling her sadness, resting his head on her lap. She sank her fingers into the dog's soft fur, seeking the familiar comfort he always provided. "What happens now?" asked Anna. "When can we return home, resume our lives?" Rachel sighed. "That may take a while. The dismantling of Olympus has created a power vacuum that's being disputed. You could still be targets, especially considering what you know and the role you played. So we continue hiding?" The frustration was evident in Emily's voice. "Not necessarily hiding," corrected Rachel, "but protected, yes. And there's something else I need to discuss with you. Something related to Project Prometheus." Charles straightened up, suddenly alert. "The project was completed. The evidence was collected and delivered. What else is there to discuss?" "The technology itself, Mr. Stewart." Rachel hesitated, carefully choosing her words. "What you created, even if not exactly what Olympus imagined, is still a powerful surveillance tool. The government is interested in using it." Charles's tone had become cold. "For the same purposes Olympus was planning. To protect the country is what they say." Rachel didn't sound entirely convinced, like a weapon for the right side this time. The silence that followed was loaded with tension. Emily could feel her father internally struggling with the moral dilemma that presented itself. Prometheus, created to expose the truth, was now at risk of becoming a tool of control in the hands of other powerful people. "The difference between right and wrong," said Emily finally, "isn't in the tool, but in who uses it and how." She turned toward her father. "Isn't that what you taught me, Dad?" Charles touched his daughter's face, a gesture full of affection and admiration. "Yes, my little guardian. And that's why the decision about Prometheus doesn't belong to me alone. It belongs to us as a family." Anna moved closer, forming an intimate circle among the three. "And what's your opinion, Emily?" she asked, genuinely interested in her daughter's perspective. Emily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility. In her 17 years, she had never imagined finding herself in a position where her voice could influence the course of her country's history. "I think the truth should never be feared, only the way people manipulate it." She stroked Shadow thoughtfully. "Prometheus should continue to be what it always was, a guardian of truth, not a weapon." 2 weeks had passed since the conversation with Agent Rachel. The Stewart family had been transferred to a country house on the outskirts of Monterey, an isolated and secure location, far from the curious eyes of the press that still incessantly covered the dismantling of Olympus. On that sunny morning, Emily was walking around the property with Shadow, enjoying the breeze coming from the nearby sea. The smell of salt in the air was invigorating, different from the Portland air she was used to. Her steps were light, almost dancing, a notable change in her behavior in recent weeks. "You seem lighter today," observed Charles, approaching silently, but not enough to go unnoticed by his daughter's sharpened senses. Emily smiled, turning toward her father's voice. "It's as if a weight has been lifted from my shoulders." She extended her hand, which Charles promptly held. "I think I'm finally processing everything that happened." They walked together to a wooden bench under a large tree where they sat. Shadow lay at Emily's feet, always vigilant, but more relaxed than he had been in months. "Mom told me about the decision you made," said Emily, after a moment of comfortable silence. about Prometheus. Charles sighed, looking at the horizon where the sky met the sea. It was the right decision. The technology will be used only as originally planned, to monitor those who hold power, not ordinary citizens, and under the supervision of an independent committee, not just the government. And you're going to lead that committee, affirmed Emily, a touch of pride in her voice. Temporarily, Charles gently squeezed his daughter's hand, until permanent structures are established. After that, I want to step back, focus on what really matters. And what would that be? You, our family, the time we lost. Emily tilted her head, a gesture that Charles knew well, indicating she was reflecting deeply on something. You know, Dad, in the last few days I've been thinking a lot about vision. Not the physical kind, which I never had, but the ability to see beyond the apparent. She paused, organizing her thoughts. We're all blind in some way. Mom couldn't see she was being manipulated by Olympus. Richard couldn't see that he was betraying not only you but his own principles, and you— I couldn't see that I was putting everyone in danger by hiding the truth, completed Charles, his voice loaded with guilt. That's not it. Emily smiled, squeezing her father's hand. You didn't see that I was stronger than you imagined, that you could have trusted me with the truth from the beginning. Charles was silent for a moment, absorbing his daughter's words. You're right. I underestimated you, wanting to protect you. Ironic, isn't it? I, who built an entire technology based on truth, ended up hiding it from the one who most deserved to know it. The important thing is that now we're all seeing more clearly, said Emily, her voice soft. And speaking of seeing clearly, I have news to share. The tone of her voice changed slightly, arousing Charles's curiosity. What news? Emily took a deep breath, as if she were about to dive into unknown waters. Remember that doctor who examined me when we were transferred here? He got in touch yesterday through Agent Rachel. Charles felt his heart accelerate, a mixture of hope and apprehension taking hold of him. And what did he say? He reviewed my case, the exams I took years ago. Emily hesitated briefly. Dad, he believes my condition may not be permanent as we were always told. There's a surgery, still experimental, but it has shown promising results in cases similar to mine. Emily. Charles could barely breathe. That's frightening, she completed, a slight tremor in her voice, because that's how I feel. I've spent my entire life in darkness. I built my identity, my way of understanding the world, everything based on my other senses. The possibility of seeing terrifies you, concluded Charles, perfectly understanding his daughter's internal conflict. Yes, a solitary tear ran down Emily's face. What if I don't know how to live in a world of images? What if I lose the connection I have with people, the ability to feel what's beyond the visible? Shadow, sensing his owner's emotion, stood up and placed his head on her lap. Emily sank her fingers into the animal's soft fur, seeking comfort. And, have you decided what you want to do? Charles asked carefully. Not yet. Emily took a deep breath. But I've thought a lot about what you did. Your courage to face the unknown to protect what you believed was right. Maybe I need the same courage now. Charles hugged his daughter, feeling a mixture of pride and admiration. Whatever your decision, we'll be by your side. And know that with or without physical vision, you'll always be the most extraordinary person I've ever known. At that moment, Anna appeared on the path leading to the house, waving to them. Charles, Emily, we have a visitor, she called. Approaching, they could see that Anna was accompanied by a familiar figure that made Shadow wag his tail cheerfully. Dr. Oliver, exclaimed Emily, recognizing the voice of the veterinarian who had cared for Shadow since he was a puppy. The man approached with a warm smile, which Emily could feel in his voice. Hello, Emily. I've come to see how my favorite patient is doing. He bent down to greet Shadow, who responded animatedly, and also to bring some news. What news? Asked Emily, curious. Shadow isn't just an extraordinary guide dog, as you know. The veterinarian sat next to them. He comes from a special lineage trained for specific services. Recently we started a breeding program for dogs with his characteristics, and I'd like to know if you would allow Shadow to participate. His puppies could help many people. Emily was momentarily speechless. The idea of little shadows around the world touching her heart in an unexpected way. "What do you think, boy?" she asked the dog, who barked once as if perfectly understanding. "I think that's a yes." Everyone laughed, easing the emotional tension of the previous moment. It was as if the universe was offering a symbol of renewal, of continuity, even amid the uncertainties they still faced. Later that same night, Emily was alone in her room, sitting on the edge of the bed, with the Prometheus device in her hands. The part that Charles had entrusted to her, which would not be handed over to the committee, but would remain as a reminder, a symbol of the journey they had traveled. "Guardian of truth," she murmured, running her fingers over the smooth surface of the device. "That's what we are, isn't it, Shadow? Guardians not of technology, but of something much more valuable." Shadow, lying at her feet, raised his head, always attentive to his owner's voice. The decision about the surgery still lingered in her mind, but now it seemed less frightening. Just as her father had faced the unknown to protect the truth, perhaps it was her turn to face her own shadows, her own fears. After all, true vision wasn't in the eyes, but in the courage to see beyond the apparent, to always seek the truth, however painful or frightening it might be. With that thought, Emily put the device in a small box she kept on her bedside table. Tomorrow would be a new day, the first of many in a life that finally could be lived without secrets, without lies, only with truth as a guide, the most powerful light in the darkness. 6 months had passed since the dismantling of Olympus. The trial of those involved proceeded slowly through the justice system, but irreversibly. The country was still processing the revelations amid an unprecedented political and social transformation. And at the center of this hurricane previously was the Stewart family. Now, however, they had found a refuge in the normalcy they so longed for. The day dawned sunny in Monterey. Emily, sitting on the porch of the house that had become her new home, waited anxiously. Her fingers drummed nervously on the arm of the chair, while Shadow, always attentive, remained by her side, his presence a familiar anchor on a day that promised profound changes. "Nervous?" asked Anna, approaching with 2 cups of tea, handing one to her daughter. Emily accepted the hot drink, the comforting aroma of chamomile invading her nostrils. "Terrified would be the word," she admitted, with a tremulous smile. "It's as if I'm about to be born again into a completely unknown world." Anna sat next to her daughter, observing her with a mixture of pride and apprehension. The weeks of preparation for this moment had been intense. Medical consultations, examinations, therapy sessions, all to prepare Emily not only for the possibility of success in the surgery, but also for the chance of failure. "Whatever the outcome, you remain you, Emily." Anna held her daughter's hand. "Your essence isn't in your eyes, but in your heart, in your soul." Emily nodded, squeezing her mother's hand in response. The last few months had profoundly transformed the relationship between them. After all, the revelations, the lies and secrets exposed, mother and daughter had to rebuild trust from zero. And surprisingly, the process brought them closer than ever before. "Where's Dad?" asked Emily, noticing Charles's absence. "In the office, finalizing some details of the report for the Prometheus committee," Anna sighed. "You know how he is. Even today, he can't set work aside." Emily smiled, recognizing her father's typical behavior. "Actually, I think it's his way of dealing with anxiety. He's as nervous as I am." The sound of approaching footsteps confirmed her suspicion. Charles came out through the porch door, trying to appear casual, but the tension was evident in his voice. "Dr. Mitchell just called. He's on his way to pick us up," he announced, sitting on the other side of Emily, forming a protective circle around his daughter. The three remained silent for a few minutes, each absorbed in their own thoughts. It was Emily who finally broke the silence. "I've been thinking about Richard," she said hesitantly. Charles and Anna exchanged concerned looks. Richard Fontaine had been a delicate topic in recent months. After agreeing to cooperate with the investigations, he had been placed in a witness protection program. His Current location unknown. What about him? Charles asked carefully. I forgive him, said Emily simply. I can't hate him despite everything. He made terrible choices, but he also risked himself to protect us in the end. Anna leaned in, kissing her daughter's forehead. Your heart has always been your greatest gift, Emily. That capacity to forgive, to see beyond appearances, is something few people possess. And you don't need physical eyes for that, added Charles, the admiration evident in his voice. The sound of a car approaching interrupted the moment. Shadow immediately became alert, but relaxed upon recognizing the familiar vehicle. It was Dr. Mitchell, the neurosurgeon who would perform the procedure. The trip to the specialized clinic was silent. Emily kept her hand firmly gripping Shadow's leash, who had received special permission to accompany her until the moment of surgery. The dog, as if understanding the gravity of the situation, remained exceptionally well behaved. Upon arrival, they were greeted by the medical team already prepared. Dr. Mitchell, with his calm and confident voice, explained once more the details of the procedure. The surgery itself will last approximately 4 hours, he informed. The initial recovery phase will be about a week, during which your eyes will remain bandaged. Afterward, we'll begin gradual stimulation, if all goes well. And the chances of success? Asked Charles, although he already knew the answer. As we discussed previously, Mr. Stewart, we're in experimental territory. But based on Emily's exams and similar cases, I'm optimistic. The doctor smiled at Emily. Your daughter is an exceptional candidate. The moment of separation came too quickly. Emily hugged her parents at length, words unnecessary in the face of the emotion they felt. Then she knelt to say goodbye to Shadow. See you soon, my faithful guardian, she whispered, hugging the dog that had been her eyes for so many years. One way or another. While Emily was taken for preparation, Charles, Anna and Shadow were led to a private waiting room. The hours that followed were the longest of their lives, filled with sporadic conversations, heavy silences, and the growing anxiety that no word could alleviate. Shadow, sensing the tension, remained alert, his eyes fixed on the door, as if expecting Emily to enter at any moment. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Dr. Mitchell appeared, still wearing his surgical uniform. His face, though tired, displayed a smile. The surgery was completed successfully, he announced. Emily is in recovery now. Everything went exactly as we expected. Anna let out a sob of relief, while Charles merely shook the doctor's hand, unable to express in words the gratitude he felt. When will we know if it worked? Asked Anna, voicing the question that hung in the air. As I explained, the process is gradual. Emily's eyes will be bandaged for a week to allow initial healing. After that, we'll begin controlled visual stimulation. We'll know. More in the coming weeks. The doctor paused. The most important thing now is for her to rest and recover from the surgery itself. The days that followed were a mixture of contained hope and constant anxiety. Emily, always accompanied by Shadow, who had received special permission to stay at the clinic, was recovering physically with surprising rapidity. Her strength of spirit, already admirable before, seemed to have multiplied in the face of the challenge. And then finally came the day to remove the bandages. The room was in semi-darkness, prepared to gradually introduce light to Emily's eyes, should the procedure have been successful. Charles and Anna were by her side, holding her hands. Shadow, sitting at the foot of the bed, remained extraordinarily quiet, as if understanding the importance of the moment. Are we ready, Emily? Asked Dr. Mitchell, positioning himself to remove the bandages. Emily took a deep breath, her heart beating so hard that it seemed everyone in the room could hear it. I'm ready, she answered, her voice firm despite the inner tremor. With slow and precise movements, the doctor began to remove the layers of gauze covering Emily's eyes. The tension in the room was palpable, a mixture of hope and fear that made the air almost difficult to breathe. When the last bandage was removed, Emily kept her eyes closed, a final hesitation before taking the step that could completely change her perception of the world. Take all the time you need, said Dr. Mitchell softly. There's no rush. Emily nodded slightly, gathering courage. Her fingers squeezed her parents' hands more tightly. "I'm afraid," she confessed in a whisper. "We're here," replied Anna, her voice choked with emotion. Charles couldn't say anything, his throat closed by the knot of expectation and apprehension. With a deep breath, Emily finally opened her eyes, slowly, as if testing a muscle dormant for years. At first, all she saw were blotches, undefined shadows in the purposely darkened environment. There was no sharpness, only different intensities of light and darkness, but it was more than she had ever experienced before. I see shadows," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "There are differences in light." The doctor moved carefully into Emily's visual field. "Can you perceive my movement?" he asked. "Yes," exclaimed Emily, a smile illuminating her face. "There's a shadow moving. Is it you?" "Yes, it's me." Dr. Mitchell couldn't hide the satisfaction in his voice. "This is excellent, Emily. Better than we expected for the first day." Tears now flowed freely down Anna and Charles's faces. Years of contained hope, of denied possibilities now transformed into the purest joy. It wasn't complete vision, but it was a beginning, a miracle none of them believed possible until recently. Shadow, sensing the change in the room's energy, approached the bed, placing his head near Emily's hand. She turned instinctively toward the animal. "Shadow," she called, extending her hand. "Where are you, boy?" The dog barked softly, and Emily turned her face toward the sound. That's when she saw it, a more defined form, larger and darker than the other shadows, moving, approaching her. "I can see you," she exclaimed, laughing and crying at the same time. "Not clearly, but I know it's you." That moment marked the beginning of a journey that would be long and at times frustrating. In the months that followed, Emily went through an intense visual rehabilitation program. Her brain's capacity to process visual information evolved slowly, like a muscle that needed to be strengthened after years of inactivity. There were days of surprising progress when she could distinguish colors and shapes more clearly, and there were days of setback when visual fatigue and headaches left her disheartened, but at no moment did she give up. A year after the surgery, Emily was on the beach near her house, her bare feet feeling the warm sand of late afternoon. By her side, as always, was Shadow, now a bit slower due to age, but still her faithful companion. Charles and Anna walked further ahead, hand in hand, silhouettes against the setting sun. Her vision still wasn't perfect. It never would be. The world for Emily continued to be a mosaic of not fully defined shapes, colors that sometimes mixed, depths that still confused her, but it was infinitely more than she had ever imagined possible. The most surprising, however, was discovering that her true vision, that which allowed her to see beyond appearances, feel people's emotions, perceive hidden truths, hadn't diminished with the partial acquisition of physical vision. On the contrary, this sensitivity seemed to have intensified, as if her years in darkness had been necessary training for what was to come. "What are you thinking about?" asked Charles, who had returned with Anna to join his daughter. Emily smiled, observing the horizon where the sun began to dip into the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that she was still learning to recognize. "I'm thinking about Prometheus," she replied, "the myth, not the project." "The Titan who stole fire from the gods to give to humanity?" inquired Anna, sitting next to her daughter in the sand. "Yes, he was punished for bringing light to men." Emily paused, thoughtfully caressing Shadow. But despite the punishment, it was worth it. The light of knowledge, truth, is always worth it, even when it hurts. Charles observed his daughter with admiration. In her recently completed 18 years, Emily possessed a wisdom that many did not achieve in a lifetime. "And that's why the Prometheus Committee is working so well," he commented, "because we understand the value of truth and also its responsibility." The Prometheus Committee, as it had become known, had transformed into an independent institution for monitoring power, ensuring transparency and accountability from authorities at all levels. A silent revolution that was beginning to inspire similar initiatives in other countries, It's strange to think that it all started with a secret, with lies, reflected Anna. And now we're building a world based on truth. Not so strange, replied Emily, smiling. Sometimes we need to know darkness to really value light. Shadow suddenly stood up, wagging his tail enthusiastically. Along the beach, a group of Labrador puppies approached, accompanied by Dr. Oliver and trainers. It was Shadow's first litter, now almost 6 months old, being trained to follow in their father's footsteps as guide and therapy dogs. "Hello, Stewart family," greeted the veterinarian cheerfully. "I brought some visitors who were eager to meet their father." The puppies, all golden like Shadow but with distinct personalities, ran animatedly to the group. Shadow immediately assumed a proud posture, as if he were introducing his family to the puppies. Emily laughed, enchanted by the scene she could see in its imprecise forms, but full of movement and life. She bent down to pet the puppies, which jumped and barked around her. "This one is going to a 10-year-old girl in San Francisco, also with visual impairment," explained Dr. Oliver, pointing to the calmest puppy, which had sat patiently next to Emily. "I thought you might like to meet her, perhaps share your experiences." Emily felt a wave of emotion invade her. The idea of being able to help someone who was going through what she had experienced, of being a guide not only to teach navigating the physical world, but also to find inner strength, seemed the perfect closure of a cycle. "I would love that," she replied, smiling at the little Labrador that looked at her with the same devotion as Shadow. When the sun finally disappeared on the horizon, leaving the sky in a gradient of increasingly dark blues, the Stewart family returned home, accompanied by Shadow and his puppies. The house was illuminated, welcoming, a symbol of the new beginning they had built together. Emily paused for a moment before entering, looking at the sky where the first stars began to appear. For her eyes, they were still just indistinct points of light against the darkness, but she knew they were there, shining just like the truth her father had fought to protect. The journey wasn't over. There would always be new challenges, new truths to discover, new guardians to form. But at that moment, with her family reunited and the future opening before her like a book full of possibilities, Emily knew they had found the most important thing, the balance between light and shadow, between the visible and the invisible, between what the eyes can see and what only the heart can truly perceive. And in the end, wasn't that what it meant to be a guardian of truth? If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give it a like. Tell us what city you're watching us from.